Next, we're going to look at the clone stamp tool. And unlike the healing brush and the patch tool, the clone stamp tool doesn't do any blending. Instead, it just copies pixels from one area of an image to another. Now, we did this in Chapter 7 when you copied parts from one image to another image. Here, what we're going to do, however, is we're going to use it to copy parts of the document within the same image. Let's begin with this horse image. Let's say we wanted to have multiple horses. I'll first select my clone stamp tool. S is the shortcut key. You adjust the size of your clone stamp tool. It's a brush. And you adjust the opacity up here in the options bar. Go ahead and turn that at 100% for this. Flow will also be 100%. I want everything to be aligned, and I am going to be putting it on the current layer that I'll be working off of. Of course, first thing I need to do is duplicate my layer. And then to use the clone stamp tool, I need to identify my source. So I'll hold down my Alt or Option key, select my source by clicking, and then you'll see that you can see within my cursor the area that I've clicked. I can make my brush larger, and then I can just start painting in, and you can see over, and then you can also see the crosshairs on the original source as it shows what area I am actually painting in. Now you can reduce the opacity, and we'll be doing an image with reduced opacity here in just a moment, and that'll be 10C. But for now, just to copy a new clone of part of the image, it's as easy as that. And now if I turn off that layer, you can see that the difference is just the one horse. Now, let's do a new layer, Command-Shift-N, and we'll say that's layer 2. I'll say OK. I'm going to turn off layer 1. We'll duplicate the background layer, so I have a layer that's a copy of the background layer without that cloned image on it. Going to go back to layer 2 and select that. I'm going to move my empty layer down. And I'm going to select current and below layer. So it's going to be able to see what's down here, even though I'm working on a blank layer. And so I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key to select my clone source. And I am going to clone the horse again. However, this time I'm doing it on its own layer instead of on one of the image layers. So I'm actually able to clone the horse or object, whatever it is that you're wanting to clone. I'm able to put that in its own separate layer. Once I have everything copied or cloned that I want, now I can turn off both these background layers, and you can see that I now have the option. I could resize this horse here if I wanted, etc. You could see there were areas that needed to be cleaned up. I could go in and create a mask to create a cleaner selection of just the horse. And then it makes it a lot easier to just place the horse where I want it to be. To resize it, Command or Control T to transform. And that's one of the easier ways of being able to clone on different layers and do transformations, etc. Again, if I wanted to go in and clean up my clone, all I have to do is create a mask. I can turn off these layers. Using my black brush, I can go in and I can resize my brush and I can get a nice clean selection of the horse that way. And then I'm not resizing the greenery. And the shortcut for going to black and white for your foreground and background colors is D. So if I go in here and I select red or gray as a foreground color, to get back to black and white, all I have to do is hit D on the keyboard, and you can see over here where it converts it back to black and white for my foreground and background colors. Alright, and so you can see where that could come in handy as you're going through and taking care of editing different images. If I want to drag that one down, now we can see all of the layers. Now you're not going to do anything with that image, that's just for practice. For the next image, we're going to be using the clone stamp at a reduced opacity. So go ahead and go to Bridge and open Shine. Open the Shine image. We're going to zoom in, and a lot of times when you use flash, or if you're outside, you get the light hitting the cheeks, nose, chin, etc. You can tell this was on camera flash because it's got this pinpoint light, which is horrible in her eyes. But we're going to focus on the shine. And this is going to be 10C. So the first thing I'm going to do is duplicate my background image. And then I'm going to select the clone stamp tool. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the opacity to about 20%. And the clone stamp is very handy when it comes to retouching images. You can see I still have my other image open, so I could actually clone from that image right here at 20% onto this one. Not anything that we would want to do. So I'm going to Command or Control Z to undo. And until I select a new source, that is what's going to show up. So I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key and click on her face, and now we see the horse is no longer showing up. But I do want to reduce my brush size. Now I want to point out this icon in your options bar, and that is the turn on to ignore. And when you click this button, it means that it's going to ignore adjustment layers when cloning. So if you have an adjustment layer, it is not going to be using that information for the clone. It's just going to be using your pixel-based information from your image. Now, for this, you're going to want to make sure you have a nice soft brush. You're going to want to make sure things are aligned. And we want to do airbrush style effects, which means that we're going to be doing things light and airy. This is skin, so we want to be extra careful about that. That's why we're at 20%. So we're going to focus first on eliminating the shine or hot spots on her skin. So first thing, select an area for your source and click, and then come in and lightly paint over that area. And you may want to do it more than once. That's why we're at 20%. And then I'm going to come over here to her nose, select an area for a clone source. And I may go to multiple areas so that, again, I don't get that repeating pattern. By selecting multiple areas, I'm able to reduce that possibility. And I can keep going back until I am happy with the way it looks. So I'm going to take from one side of her chin, again, multiple areas, to get a natural looking effect on this side of her chin. Up here again on the cheek, I'm wanting to reduce all of these hot spots. So we have the areas on her cheeks, her chin, her nose, and we can see the before and after. And maybe you feel like, things are starting to look a little bit flat, don't like the way that looks. The whole idea about doing things on a separate layer is you can go in and reduce the opacity. And so if I reduce the opacity of the layer that I did the retouching, I can bring back some of those highlights and make the image look a little more natural. Now I want to be careful because right here and here it's kind of looking like she's got spotty skin. And the goal is always to improve the image. You don't want to do anything that's going to degrade the image. And by doing things on their own layers, it gives you the option to go back and turn that layer on and off or reduce the opacity, etc. Now the other area that you use the clone stamp at a reduced opacity is for under the eye bags and wrinkles. Now she's got not darkness under her eyes, but she's got quite a bit of eye wrinkles and face wrinkles. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here below her eye. I've got a nice soft edge brush. I'm going to select my source by holding down my Alt or Option key and clicking. And then I'm going to come up here and lightly I'm going to go over the areas on her skin. And so before I begin working under her eyes and on her wrinkles, I'm going to duplicate this layer because I want to work on a layer at 100%. And next I'm going to select my source by holding down my Alt or Option key over here under her eye, and then I'm going to move up and I am going to paint over the areas that I want to adjust. And again, I'm selecting multiple source options and I'm looking for light color and texture of skin. I want it to be similar and I don't want it to be very obvious of what I've done. So I'm looking for areas that don't have obvious texture or wrinkles because I'm not wanting to remove her wrinkles. I'm just wanting to remove the severity of her wrinkles. And so if I turn this layer off, you can see the before and then after. Go ahead and turn this layer at 100%. So we're looking at just the eye changes here now. Again, we're just looking to enhance the image. So now I'm going to do the eye over here to the right. I'm going to first select my source by holding my Alt or Option key down and clicking. And then I am going to paint, and again I'm only painting at 20% opacity. And I have airbrush turned on. So when I select my source, and I'm doing multiple selections of the source again, as I go through, I'm trying to make sure that I'm selecting light colors of skin and textures of skin as I go through. Now I'm going to do her smile lines here. And I might go over it a couple of times. I'm just softening them. I'm not removing them 100%. Take care of this over here. And so that's what you're going to do. You're going to go in and you're going to reduce the severity of her wrinkles around her eyes and on her face. You're going to remove the shine from her cheeks, nose, and chin. And then using the healing brushes that you learned about earlier, you're going to go in and you're going to do minor adjustments just here on the chin. You can see where she needs a little bit of help. And I need to make my brush size much smaller for small blemishes. And then when you're through, you're going to group your retouching layers together and name that group retouching. And so I'm going to select the two retouching layers over here in my layers panel, go under my layer menu, select new group from layers. I'm going to name it retouching, click OK. And now I can turn off both layers with a single click of the eye beside my group and see my before and after. And I can see some areas like right here that I'm not happy with the changes, and so I would go in and finish my retouching work. And when you're through with this, you're going to save it as 10C. So File, Save As, 10C, your last name, _shine. Make sure it's in your Chapter 10 folder. Make sure you've completely gone through. Again, you're not removing the wrinkles. You're not 100% flattening out her skin and removing the shine. You're wanting a little bit. You can see I have some highlights still showing in those areas. You don't want a flat looking face. You want it to appear natural. You're looking to enhance the image. And that's how you would use the clone stamp when retouching your images.